Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another one of our Bookshop events. It's wonderful for you. Thank you all so much for coming. Can I welcome to the stage our host for the evening, Harriet Queralt, with Raynor Winn.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming along to hear Raynor this evening. So you'll all know that she's the author of the very best-selling and inspirational accounts of her epic walks with Moth, and also with sort of Moth's journey with CBD. So we've got The Salt Path, The Wild Silence, and Landlines. And Landlines is the newest book, which we're mainly going to talk about tonight. But I did sort of want to start really by taking you right back to the beginning. And, you know, can you tell us a bit about how you and Moth first met?
How we first met? Oh, God, it's going back a long time. I was a teenager. I was 18 at sixth form college. And I went into the cafe. And it was a really crowded room. It was bigger than this and absolutely full of people. And I just looked up through this crowd of people, and there was a little party in the heads, and the absolute opposite side of the room, there was this young man in this bright white shirt, dipping a Mars bar in a cup of tea. And I just knew that was the one for me.
You both like your cups of tea.
Yes.
There's a lot of tea drinking in the books. Yeah.
So much tea.
Yeah. Oh, so you, if we sort of move on a bit now, so I'm sure lots of you have read the Salt Path, and this was your sort of first epic walk. So 630 miles, I think, of
Yes.
the southwest coast path. So I know lots of people will have read the book, but for people that haven't, can you explain a bit about kind of what led to you making the decision to do that walk?
Yeah, well, after that moment in the college canteen, we were just together then, and we had this sort of dream that we created over the following years, that we would find a place in the hills, a place where we could call our home, but also where we could maybe make a way that visitors could come and stay with us for their holidays, and that would finance our dream life. And that was our fantasy. And I think when I was about 30, we actually managed to do that. And we bought this ruin in the Welsh hills that literally had holes in the walls and the roof was falling in. But it had everything that our little equation required. So it was perfect. And we spent the next 20 years of our life turning that into everything that we dreamt it could be, and it became like the whole focus of our life. All our time, our effort, our money all went into creating this place, and people came and stayed with us for their holidays, and it was everything we hoped it would be. We kept sheep and vegetables, and our children grew up there and left for university. But in the background to those years, we had this financial dispute with a lifetime friend that ended in a court case and saw us being served with an eviction notice from that home. And they gave us a week, 7 days, to pack 20 years of life into boxes and leave. But it was during that week that Moth had what we thought was going to be just a routine hospital appointment, and it turned out to be anything but, because he was diagnosed with corticobasal degeneration, a neurological disease that has no treatment, no cure. And the best advice they could give us was, don't get too tired and be careful on the stairs. But then just as we were about to leave the house for that final time, saw a book in a packing case. And it was Mark Wallington's 500-mile walk, is about walking around the southwest coast path with his dog. And I think it was awful final few minutes in the house when just the idea of going for a walk, putting a rucksack on our backs and going for a walk seemed the most obvious thing to do. And so we did. And that became the Salt Path, the story of that walk.
And it was absolutely sort of transformational, wasn't it, in lots and lots of ways? Can you?
Well, in so many ways. Not only, well, we started out that walk in such a state of anxiety and fear and despair, bitterness, and all those emotions of losing our house and Moth's diagnosis. And I think had we not taken that walk, I think those emotions would have come to define our lives. Because as we walked out of that door, we became homeless. And I think had we not had the purposefulness of that walk, then all those emotions would have crowded in, and who knows where our life would have taken us then. But something about just walking, about just taking the next step, it allows all that emotional turmoil to subside. It just lets it just slip down to where it belongs, which is down there, and allows you to live. But then it did something very unexpected to Moth's health as well, because he'd been told there was nothing that could be done that would improve his health at all. But as we walked, we found his health did improve, from starting out that walk, not able to even put his coat on without help. There was that moment at the start of the salt path when he ran up the beach, holding a fully erected tent above his head. And it felt, at the time, it felt like a miracle. It felt like something magical had happened in our lives.
Yeah, amazing. And then the walk was, absolutely incredible, but you came to the end of the walk, and how was that? Was it difficult? Because you did then have a home, but
yes.
it was an end to something quite amazing. Was it hard to come to terms with the end of that walk?
Well, it was. We got to the end and we met that remarkable woman that offered us some accommodation, which was absolutely beyond our wildest dreams. And life should have been perfect. It should all have been easy and slip back into normal life. But I didn't find the transition very easy at all. We'd moved into this amazing little village, a little coastal village in Cornwall. And it should have been like a dream. But I couldn't sleep, I couldn't settle. I was awake in the nights and walking out on the headlands, and there was something about stopping walking on those headlands and coming to live in that village. And it was almost as if all that strength and that power that we'd taken from the path, as if just by stopping and going back in under a roof, as if it was slipping away. And I couldn't sleep, and it came to the point where, if you've read The Wild Silence, you know all this. I put the tent up in the bedroom, and slept in that for weeks, which seemed to do the trick.
Yeah, but other walks followed in the Wild Silence. So
yes.
You had an amazing trip to Iceland.
Yes, we did, yes. Moth had studied and finished his degree, and lots of other things had happened, which you can read The Wild Silence and find out. And then we went to Iceland if you've read The Salt Path, with Dave and Julie, who we'd met on the coast path, and they came to Iceland with us, and we walked the still can't say it. Laugavega, that trail in Iceland. So through the southern highlands of Iceland, and it was absolutely remarkable walk. We caught this off-road bus that took us for 4 hours into the central highlands of Iceland, and then it just dropped us at the head of this extinct lava flow on this great glacial riverbed, and then it drove away, and it was like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? But we walked through this incredible landscape, through ash fields and extinct lava flows with hot water boiling under our feet, and through glaciers. And it was almost a walk. It was like walking through evolution in a way, from that moment of the land erupting through those ash fields, right through to where there was like little bits of vegetation starting to take hold in where the bacteria had caused some sort of reaction with the ash and started to form some sort of earth right down into the scrubby ash and rowan areas, and then down into pasture lands. It really did feel like a whole trip through evolution. It was remarkable. And again, we got to the end of that, and it was a much shorter walk, but Moth's health was improving again. So remarkable.
So that brings us to Landlines, and it starts with a description of really quite a difficult time for Moth. So things had deteriorated quite a lot. Can you tell us sort of how he was at that point at the beginning of the book?
Yeah, it was the sort of winter of 2021, and it was the end of sort of that final lockdown. And we were all the same. We were all just confined to our locality and just walking around in circles, as we all were. I don't know how it was here, but in Cornwall it was quite strict, and you know, if you went too far, then the police would be ushering you back home again. I don't know if it was the same here, but it was quite rigorously enforced in the south. And so we did find we were just walking around in circles, really. And Moth's health was deteriorating really quickly. He was having falls, and his memory was going, and he was starting to get a little bit confused about things, and he was having a problem with small motor movements. And he had come to the point where he was almost accepting that this was the start of those end symptoms, and it was really just nothing could be done now, and he would just have to accept that this was where it was going.
So at that point, you thought it would be a good idea to attempt the most challenging walk that you'd ever done, that you'd always wanted to do but never had.
It wasn't really intentional in that way.
The book was haunting you, wasn't it? You kept seeing it.
Well, that's it. It wasn't my fault, really. I went to the log basket to look for my gloves, which I lost, my log gloves. And I picked them up and I knocked some books off the bookshelf as I did so. And then the plastic bags, that incredible one, beguilings of the South Coast Path, and I opened that, and it was like full of bits of paper and the Iceland one, and I opened that, and that still smelled of sulphur and volcanoes, and then there's this other little skinny little guide book that we've never used, and it was a guide book for the Cape Wrath Trail, and it was my Moth had always wanted to go to this incredibly remote, well, okay, the most remote, the most isolated trail in the country. And I put it back on the shelf, but the idea just wouldn't go away, the idea that maybe if we just tried just one more time. And so I got it back out again, and I just left it around the house, you know, as you do, on the table and on the worktop and in the bathroom. Till a point came when one day when he walked into the kitchen, he slapped it down on the kitchen top and said, "Going north, are we?" And that was it. We sort of committed ourselves to this incredibly remote, isolated walk.
Yeah, I mean, so challenging. What was the most challenging moment of that walk, do you think?
Possibly the very beginning. The very beginning was really hard. We were going to go to Cape Wrath. Now, we've just talked about how to say Wrath. We've gone through the whole Wrath, Roth thing. So I'm going with the Wrath. So we were going to go to Cape Wrath, which is the lighthouse on the very northwestern corner of Scotland. But we didn't realise that the military were on manoeuvres and we couldn't go there at all. So we ended up at this beach called Shagra, just maybe 8 to 10 miles south of Cape Wrath. And it was the most incredible, beautiful beach. But as the sun went down, all the cliffs sort of shone pink. And we were just sitting there the night before we'd convinced ourselves that we would actually start this path. And this huge bird flew out from the rocks beneath us and just out over the sea. And it was a white-tailed seagull. which have been extinct in this country, but I think they brought them back in. We were from breeding pairs in Norway, I think. And there was just something about that moment, about watching this incredible bird with this immense wingspan that had been extinct here, but was now thriving again. And just the idea that you could bring something back from the brink sort of made it seem like it was a feasible thing to be doing. So we set off through this incredible landscape of, if you've never been to the very northwest of Scotland, it's like nowhere else in the country. It's so remote, so dark. These huge, dark, angry mountains that seem to be almost still erupting from the ground. There's something alien about the very, very northwestern corner of Scotland. It's like,
and underfoot as well. It was really
it was just bogland. Bogs and rocks and little lochs all the way. So pretty tough walk. Yeah. And then for Moth, being in the state of health that he was, it made it not so easy. So the start was really quite tricky. Oh, you can't hear me?
You can turn to the hand mic
Hand mic? Oh, okay.
Is that all right? Okay, great.
Move my head around too much.
So what was the most challenging point of that walk? I mean, was there a point where you thought you might have to give up?
Many points. I think possibly one of the hardest bits was we did actually make it through those first days, maybe the first week of that walk. We'd gone south of Ullapool, and we were heading into the edge of this area called the Great Wilderness. It's quite a lot of this area of Scotland has no roads into it at all, so you can only access it on foot or by boat. And the Great Wilderness was one of those areas, and we were just going to sort of like pass around on one edge of it. And we found ourselves just going over this hause, and I think it was the huge mountain of An Chelach was to the side of us, and ahead of us there were two glens. One of them, strangely, was dry. There seemed to be no rain in it, but the other glen it's as if it was funneling all the rain and all the water out of the sky was being sucked down this glen like a funnel. And I can remember standing there with the map at the top just before we dropped down and made a choice, thinking it's got to be the one to the right, it's got to be the one to the right. But the more I looked at this map that was just flying in the wind, there was no way out of it. It was the rainy one. And we headed down. As we got down into the valley bottom, the rain was so hard because it was just like pouring down off the mountains. It wasn't just in waterfalls, it was like the whole mountains had turned into a sheet of waterfall. And the river was rising. As we watched it, it was rising while we were trying to find where to cross the first of the rivers into this glen. It was just rising and rising from what would have been there if we'd just got on with it to here by the time we'd crossed it. And we headed into this valley, which should have been, it was 3 miles to the other end, and then another river to cross to get out the other end and back where we needed to be going. And we thought, we can do this afternoon. We can get out the other side before the rivers rise any higher, and it'll all be okay. But we were walking through this glen bottom, and I just looked back at Moth, who was walking towards me, just as he stubbed his toe on a rock and went straight down onto the ground, and he almost like flat on the ground skied forwards and I remember seeing water around his head. It was like a jet ski plume around his head as he just dived into the water. And obviously, he wasn't feeling on his best form when he stood up. And he cut his head and there was blood everywhere, and I think there was a chance he probably had concussion, really. But I was trying to do that test that they do you see it on the rugby matches, don't you? They hold a finger up and then they've got concussion if they can see more than one. But then Moth has a bit of a problem with his eyesight, so he can often see more than one, so it was no help at all. So we had to put the tent up, and there was nowhere because it was just rock and boulders and bog grass and water. But there was this mound, it was about the size of this room, that was seemed to be staying above the water. So we put the tent on that, and we sat in the tent for 2 days. And Moth sort of drifted in and out of any sort of logical conversation. And he took all the paracetamol we had, and we ate a lot of noodles. But then slowly one day the rain just seemed to stop. That was really had been possibly the worst of it, because I thought he actually had got concussion and we were trapped in a place where there was no way out until the water levels fell. And what would I do then if he really couldn't carry on? It was in possibly one of the most remote points of the whole walk. And but then the rain stopped, and I looked out of the tent, and just outside the tent, it was as if these really dense black clouds were still there, but this shaft of sunlight coming beneath it was catching all the water, all the rain, all the wetness everywhere, and it was just turning the whole thing into this, like, I don't know, it's just like crystal light everywhere. It was like a prism somehow. And just on the other side of this dry mound was a stag, which obviously some of the deer had come down onto this piece of ground because it was the only thing above water. And just at that moment, as the rain stopped, he shook himself, just like a dog when it comes out of the bath and soaks the bathroom. And it just created this rainbow of light around his body. And it was from going from those previous 2 days having been possibly the worst and quite frightening, really, to just feeling as if we weren't watching the scene, but we were part of that scene. We were part of that, what was the deer and the landscape and the water, and it turned into the most remarkable moment. So that would probably be it. Yeah. Worst and the best in one.
Exactly. And the way you describe it in the book is just, amazing. Yeah, so you amazingly managed the Cape Wrath path, and then decided to carry on, and on, and basically walked back to Cornwall, which was, I hadn't realised when I saw that actually had happened. So, I was, are they going to? And what an achievement. And again, did it have another? Well, it did, didn't it? Have another, really good effect on Moth, and he managed it, and he got stronger through walking.
Yeah, it was quite a remarkable journey, to just keep walking through the country, to see so much of this country that you don't always see. Yeah, we got to the end of, like you say, the Cape Wrath Trail, and Moth's health had improved, but probably not in that really drastic way that it had in the Salt Path, and he felt like maybe we should go a little bit further. So we were at the end of the Cape Wrath Trail, start of the West Highland Way, and it seemed like, okay, why not? It's just another 100 miles, just another week. So we carried on down the West Highland Way, and that was just like set the template of the whole of the rest of the country somehow. A bit further again, oh, go on.
You managed to find paths, didn't you?
Yes.
Even if it was the canal system, or
through the canals that connected one path to another, and it was amazing.
Tell us about some of the kind of interactions you had on the way, because I know in the Salt Path there's some brilliant characters that you meet on the way, and again here, who sort of stuck with you of the people that you met on the way?
Well, there were some amazing people. Obviously, you walk 1,000 miles, you do meet a lot of people. There were some incredible people, but in the north of Scotland, I think I came to realise that people really relied on each other there, that if somebody needed help, they would just give it because they knew that that's what survival was about. we were coming down from this the side of this mountain called Quinag in Assynt, and it was a horrid day. It was like fog and rain and drizzle, and it should have been the most amazing view from there, but all we could see was like 2 feet ahead of us. And we came down onto a road. Long, protracted story, but you'll have to read it in the book. For some reason, we needed to go down into the village, get a taxi, and go back to where we'd come from because we needed something from there. So we started to walk towards this village where we had the possible hope that there might be a taxi, although most of Scotland wasn't functioning at that time because we'd just come out of COVID and we were all quite nervous about getting back into life. And this car pulled up next to us, and we said, "Oh, it's okay, don't need a lift because we're going that way," and he was going the other way. He said, "Well, get in out of the rain, tell me what you're doing." So we got into his car and he sped off down the road. And we said, "Where are you going?" You know, thinking, what have we done? We've got into a stranger's car. If our kids told us they'd done this, we'd be so angry. But we got into his car and he sped off north when we were trying to head west. And straight back the place we'd just toiled our way up the road from earlier on. And it screeched to a halt in the end when Moth was just shouting, "Stop." And he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "We needed to go down into the village to get a taxi." He said, "There aren't any taxis. She told me you needed to go back up to Shagra. I'm taking you." I said, "But that's 60 miles out of your way." He said, "Well, how else are you going to get there?" And off we went. And that was how it was in the north of Scotland.
Yeah.
You said you needed some help. It was there. You'd said something that intimated you needed some help. It was there. It was incredible, really. And, further down the country, we had some similar experiences. And then others less so, but that's life, isn't it?
But this time round, you met people on the walk that recognised you and knew who you were, which is quite different to the salt path where you obviously haven't written the book. So
yeah, we did. It was quite strange to be walking along, and we got onto West Highland Way, which, funnily enough, we started to encounter women, which we hadn't seen much of on Cape Wrath, but that's another story entirely. But this group of women on the West Highland Way, and they stopped and they were chatting, and they were saying, "Oh, we're from Cornwall, and we're only doing this because it's my birthday, it's what I wanted to do." So we've all come to do this walk for my 50th birthday because we'd read the Salt Path. And one of the women in the group said, "Are you Raynor Winn?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I hate you." I said, Why? She said, "I wanted to go to a spa."
But the funniest was the person you met who told you you should read the Salt Path.
Yes, we were much further south. We were on the Offansdyke Path by then, and we were just eating some chips outside a pub, and our rucksacks were next to us, and this man came over and said, "They're big rucksacks, you're walking a long way with those." I said, yeah. I said, "You should read the Salt Path. Make you feel differently about how you pack your rucksacks." So it's quite a good book. He gets a brain tumour or something. He dies in the end, but it's really good.
Very funny. So in this book particularly, I think you covered quite a lot of social issues, didn't you? So, I mean, obviously you've talked about homelessness before, but it was quite striking, I suppose, because you were walking through some very urban areas, covering the whole of Britain. There's some quite interesting thoughts on homelessness. You cover Brexit, quite a few thoughts on Brexit, which affected you personally. Climate change, there's a lot of social issues. What sort of response have you had to these sort of...
That could be quite off-putting if you haven't read the book, couldn't it?
No, talk about the boots.
The boots. I did have some boot issues. I had some really serious boot issues. Before we set off on this walk, I've watched some YouTube videos of somebody walking the Cape Wrath Trail. if I can recommend one thing when you're going to go and walk a trail, do not watch YouTube videos. I watched these videos of this man who walked the Cape Wrath Trail with his dog, and he started in the south, whereas we'd started in the north. And the further north he got, the deeper the bogs got. So it was from wading through these bogs that were ankle height, it was up to waist height with his dog round his neck, and it was all nightmare. And so I convinced myself that I needed these like massive boots, because otherwise I was going to get trench foot. So we bought these ex-army boots that seemed like such a good idea, and were dead comfy when you just walked around the block in them. But then when you walk for miles and miles and miles with a rucksack on your back, not so good. They were fine for Moth, but after the first day I took mine off, and they like took the top layer of skin with them, and that was the story of the Cape Wrath Trail for me, was how many more layers of skin can I shed from my feet, and how many packets of blister plasters are there in Scottish stocks, because can I buy them all? Everywhere we went, I was just buying boxes and boxes and boxes of Compeed. So many that I'm really disappointed that I've not had a contract from Compeed.
I know, I was going to ask you that.
Anyway, what's that got to do with Brexit?
Yes.
Not a lot, you would think. But I tried to buy some more boots at very few places where it was possible to buy walking boots. And I've got really average sized feet, really sort of 6 and a bit average sized feet. But everywhere I went, you couldn't get a size 6 at all. And every single time they said, oh no, they're the most common size, so we haven't got those. And we've got size 8, you can have those, I resisted the size 8 boots until I got to Manchester, when it got to the point where I absolutely had to have some more boots. And in the whole of Manchester, every shop I went into, I've got no size 6, but you can have a size 8. So in the end, I gave in and bought these size 8 shoes, size 8 boots, and 3 pairs of socks, and it almost did it until I was going downhill, and then it's like, because my foot wasn't held, I slipped off a rock and like this incredible foot strain. So the whole thing was a boot disaster, which caused me to talk a lot about supply and demand and post-Brexit Britain. But I didn't talk about it. It was the conversations that were going on around me. Yeah. So this isn't my opinion. This is just merely me reporting what I'm hearing being said around me. And it was really strange. We were walking through the country just post-pandemic, when we were all feeling very differently about each other, different about how we interacted with each other, how we thought about our connection to one another and to the land itself. Again, there was the whole question of Brexit was there in all those many conversations that I've recorded in here. Conversations about boundaries and borders and how that affected how we interacted with each other and how we felt about what a border really meant. And it was a very unusual time to be walking through the country. So much so that I, for the first time, bought a notebook and kept notes. And I've realised when I came to write the book, I'm not a very good note keeper. Because they're just notebooks full of conversations, and then it'll be 8 chips, stopped here, made tea, and then another conversation. So obviously I'm not born to take notes.
Well, I'm surprised they kept dry with the amount of I mean, the amount of rivers that you actually waded through. Yes. And no towels, no dry clothes, just amazing.
Yeah, you'd think I'd be more organised after all these miles, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So how do you think these books, sort of writing these books, I mean, obviously the walks were transformational, but how do you think kind of writing the books has changed your life? Because I think, from when you wrote The Salt Path to when you wrote Landlines, your life's changed quite a lot. Did it affect the way that you walked? Did it affect the journey? Was it different?
Different in that when we walked the coast path, I hadn't ever written a word. And so writing about that experience wasn't anything that was in my mind at all. But obviously we set out on this walk, not with the intention of it becoming a book, but merely because we were desperate about Moth's health. And we'd experienced it before. It was our only hope that there might be some way of reversing where he was. But then obviously, having now written at that point 2 books, you start to see things, and you start to see them as how could I translate that onto a page? And I think it was when we started to have so many conversations in the way that we did. That's why I bought a notebook, because I thought, actually, this is a really unusual moment in time. This is a really unusual moment in this country, and I need to keep this, I need to record it. So I think in that respect, it changed it in that respect. But actually, when you're walking a long distance, it's about the walk. It's about that next step. It's about how much your feet hurt. It's about just being lost in the moment of that incredible landscape that you're passing through.
Yeah. So where next then?
There is going to be another one, but we're still not 100% about where to just yet. But I think later this year, definitely.
Oh, well, we can't wait to read about it. I imagine that we've got lots and lots of questions. So I think there is a microphone somewhere. So if anyone's got a question, if you put your hand up, then someone will bring you a microphone.
What I would say is there's only one microphone, so if any audiences upstairs want to ask questions, we'll relay it through the microphone system, either Harriet or myself, so the virtual audience can hear the question. But do put your hands up with any questions you've got. We've got one just here.
Was Moth mistaken for Simon Armitage when you were in Scotland?
Not this time, no. Thankfully. No. I haven't. I still haven't met Simon Armitage. One day I will. I did go to an event once, and he left me a message because he'd been there the day before, and he said he didn't mind that we'd eaten all the cakes, but don't do it again.
He came to Tring, so if he comes again, we'll invite you.
If he comes again,
yeah.
Make him a cake.
We'll try and invite you on the both same day. So that'd be...
One day.
I went to a concert recently with the Musicians Nights and John Spears, and they mentioned the Salt Lines project, which they had done with you, and wondered if you could say a bit about that.
Great timing.
Oh yes, the Salt Lines project. It's been one of the most remarkable things that have happened over the last year, really. It was in 21, when we were walking down the country, actually, that Gigspan, a big band, a folk band, got in touch with me. It's a folk band made up of Peter Knight, who used to be in Steel I Span, and John Spires, who was in Bellowhead, and some other incredible musicians, Lochs and other amazing musicians, who formed this group. And they said that they were collecting music and song from the Southwest, old tunes that sort of spoke from the area. And they'd read the Salt Path, and would I like to create some words to weave in amongst that, and we'd make it into some sort of show. And at that point, that's all the thought that they had. But as soon as I realised who they were, I think I thought about it for about 5 minutes and then said yes, because how could I not? But I had no idea what I was doing. None of us did, really. We just had this vague idea and no real idea what to create or how to put it together. But they gave me free rein to go away and create whatever words I wanted to use. And so now we've formed this show that's like a tapestry of words and music that's got the feeling of the Southwest. It's got a feeling of the landscape, of the wildlife, of the sea, but also of the cultural and present day history and hopes of humanity in the Southwest as well. And I think it's turned into quite a remarkable show. If you haven't had a chance to see it though, it's here in Tring on the 22nd of July.
As it happens, I've booked it as the last night of the Tring Festival for this year. So more to follow. You'll hear the announcements about it. But Saturday night, 22nd of July, Raynor and the rest of them will be coming here.
It really is a remarkable thing. I've got to say, it's not. We've found it quite hard to describe it in the publicity because it's not like anything else. I think we've created something that is just wholly unique. And yeah, if you're in Tring, you've absolutely got to see it.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, you've got the CD.
Oh, fantastic.
Any other questions?
Must be more than that. There's
There's one down there as well.
Hello there. The walks that you've done seem really difficult. Have you ever tried any in Northumberland, where I come from?
Oh, they're not that difficult, except the Cape Wrath. I would say that was pretty tricky. We did the Pennine Way as part of that walk, which was absolutely amazing. And I'd love to come to Northumberland. I think there's something really mysterious about Northumberland. There's incredible big open spaces that are really appealing. I've only ever driven through it and I've never had a chance to
It's
spend
one of the
more
least
time
crowded counties, I think,
Yeah,
in the UK.
yeah.
Full of castles and a fantastic landscape. It's quite wild.
It really is. It seems like a really wild, beautiful area. We rode some bikes for a while in the middle of Landlines and came down from Berwick-on-Tweed to Lindisfarne and then down to Kirk Yetholm. And that was a beautiful part of the country and promised ourselves we'll go back. So I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Oh, there's a question up there. If you shout it out, we'll repeat it on the mics for the people at
For
home.
the virtual crowd.
So the question was, after such an immense walk from all the way from the north of Scotland, did you find it hard to settle again, like in the Salt Path?
I think not quite to the extent where I put the tent in the bedroom, but it was quite difficult because after you've spent months of just putting your rucksack on and moving forwards, it's very strange to stop. It's strange to put the electric kettle on and all those weird little things that we take for granted. But by the time I got back, I knew I wanted to write about it. So within a few weeks of finishing walking, I started writing about it because it was so fresh and so immediate. And then I started writing. And I normally I with the other two books, I've written just early morning. I've been an early morning writer. And I started out that way with Landlines. But I couldn't not keep going, if you know what I mean. I think I was still walking in my head, so that the writing took on the pace of the walking, and I started just doing those mornings, but very soon I was just writing all day, and I was still walking, and I think that got me over that weird transition time, because I might have been sitting in a chair, but in my head I was just still walking, and it hadn't stopped. So yeah, I think that got me through. But I think I feel that every time we stop walking, that sense of slight claustrophobia, I think, and like I've lost something. Yeah.
I think, is there a question online?
Yeah, I've got a question from Peter. which you've stepped on slightly, but what's a normal day at home with Raynor and Moth when you're just at home? What's that like?
A normal day. I don't know if we have too many normal days. I always wake up early. I'm just an early waker, so Moth's the opposite. He's a late waker. So I always get up and I have those quiet few hours in the morning where I just write or potter about or just stare out of the window or whatever I do. So that's always my early mornings. And the dog, strangely, seems to have taken on the same sleep patterns as Moth. And if I try to get him to go for a walk before 10:30 in the morning, he'll just go, "What are you talking about? It's night." And he goes back to bed. So, so it's great. I have those quiet times in the mornings. And then the rest of the day turns into whatever we're doing, whatever is filling our day. We always try to go for a walk at some point in the day, be it early, late. Sometimes we end up walking up the road in the dark, but it's whenever we can squeeze it in. That always fits into the day somewhere. Yeah.
And are you still looking after the orchard?
Yes, we are still there at the moment, yeah. We went there with the intention of bringing the biodiversity and the wildlife back to that orchard, and we've done that. It's a remarkable place now, where the deer, live in the wild corner. And this morning I walked through the orchard and there were 3 pairs of bullfinch just flying through the orchard. And from a place that had had hardly any wildlife, hardly any insect life, and not much in the way of vegetative biodiversity, it's completely changed. This carpet of celandines is just starting to break through in the orchard. And it's an incredible place, and we've done what we went there to do. So we are actually now sort of reaching a point where we've done what we went there for, and maybe it's time to think about what comes next for us.
Exciting. One more question, I think, there.
No, I've got 2 or 3 actually, and there's another one up there I can see. But let me do Geraldine's. A great question actually. Her question: how did you get your first book published? But if you look at the fact that back then you needed money, and so there was obviously a need, a desperation almost. So what was the process to getting? Did you go? Hopefully, you went to an auction and the whole thing kicked off from there. So talk us through the process of getting published.
I was in my 50s then. When it was published, I'd written the book. I'd written it not as a book, I'd written it as a record of that walk for Moth, because he was starting to lose the memory of that walk. And that seemed like an impossible thing for me, because it had been such a strong and powerful point in our lives. I couldn't bear the thought of him losing the memory of it. So I wrote it just to record that for him. Printed it off on the home printer, started out black and ended up pink as it ran out of ink, tied it up with string, and I gave it to him for his birthday, and that is all it was at that point. That's all it was ever going to be. But my daughter was staying with us at the time, and she read it before he did, and she said, Mum, it's actually not bad, you should do something with it. I thought she meant like put it in a folder or... But how could I get it published? Like I said, I was in my 50s with no academic background, no literary history or anything to bring to a publisher. But I was walking down the street one day and I saw a big issue seller, and I thought, I have actually got something to say about homelessness. So I wrote an article and I offered it to the big issue. And they picked it up straight away and published it 2 weeks later, which was really quick. And it got a really good feedback, a really strong feedback. So I thought, okay, maybe now I've got something to take with me to offer, if you know what I mean. So I Googled for an agent, not too big, not too small, something in between, and sent my 3 chapters and what have you. And 4 days later, she messaged me back and said, can I have the rest of the book? And then within a week, I'd signed with her. So it was really quick. But she has told me I always have to caveat that by saying that's not normal. Yeah, and then we took it out to publishers, and we went to Penguin's offices, and it was absolutely terrifying. But the head of Michael Joseph, who's my publisher, the first thing she said was, "We want your book," and that was it. It was just like a fairy tale, really. It's very, very lucky. That's all I can say. Very lucky.
It's great work.
There's
Have we got
a question at the
up
top.
there?
Yeah, it was Moth. It really was just the fact that Moth was losing the memory of that walk, and it just felt too important in his life to let him lose it. So I wrote it trying to create something that when he read it, he would feel as if he was right there on the path next to me. I just wanted him to feel the wind and smell the salt, and I think he can there.
I've got another one. If there's not, actually, no, there's a chap up there. Come on.
So I think the question is, you mentioned people that you met along the way, etc. Have any of them contacted you since? So people that maybe didn't know they were going to be in the book, have they recognised themselves and contacted you?
Yes, especially from the Salt Path, yeah, lots of people. Obviously, Dave and Julie, we stayed in touch with them, and they just keep cropping up like bad pennies through every book. But then there were lots of other people that have got in touch. Do you remember we stayed at the Fat Apples Cafe in the Salt Path? I did an event once, and there was some very familiar faces on the front row, and it was the whole of Fat Apples Cafe and their staff, which was fantastic. And then some Australians that we met have been in touch, and they're still in Australia, but they'd come across it there, and they've got in touch. Some of the surfers from the sheds on the north coast, yeah, I've met those. The lady with the incredibly long hair who swam on the beach with her dog, who told us that we were salted, who said that, you know, we were obviously touched by a long time out in the natural world. You're salted. She was at one of my events. And then Paddy Dillon, obviously. I met Paddy Dillon quite a few times. You might remember him as being the author of the guidebook that we used. We've used all his guidebooks. We used his guidebook in Iceland and then on the Pennine Way. And I met him first at an event in Keswick, when he just got up out of the audience and said, but we've got some new guidebooks now and they've got better maps, so I've brought you one. And then I met him for a cup of tea once in a hotel in Foy, and we sat on this balcony in the sunshine. He opened his bag up and got his pyjamas out. I said, "What are you doing with your pyjamas, Paddy? What are you doing?" And he said, "I've just brought them so that I can prove to you that they're not camouflage, because I'm not ex-SAS." So he said, "But they were green. They were green." Yeah, and so, yeah, Paddy Dillon's been an amazing person to meet from that, yeah.
And another question there?
Another question online. Samantha, it's a lovely question. Have you learned anything about yourself from walking and writing that you didn't know before?
About myself, where do you start? I think it's a really strange thing when you don't really spend time in your life thinking about what you can do or what you can't do. You're just getting on with life, aren't you? And I think most of us do that. We just go through life getting on with life. And there's never a question of what am I capable of? What can I do? Who am I really? I think most of us have such busy lives that we don't have time to dwell on those things. And I certainly did anyway. I didn't think about things in that way. I just lived. And I think it's strange when you put yourself into a position that you don't expect to be in, that you can surprise yourself with where it takes you. And you learn so many things from that, so many things. But I think some of the most remarkable things that have come from the whole experience have been at events like this. And from being utterly terrified of these events at the beginning, because I was such a, lived my own insular little life sort of person, that when the publishers told me that I got to come and talk to people, I was absolutely terrified, to the point where I tried to get the manuscript back and they wouldn't give me it. And I've been locked in the toilets at events in the beginning, and Moth's had to coax me out. It's been grim. But I think if I've learned anything, it's been from the people I've met at events. The people I've signed their books and they've shared their stories with me. And I think I've learned actually that we're all the same. We all share those same emotions, the same hopes and fears for life, and actually we're united in more ways than we're divided. It's as if I've put my story out and 1,000 have come back, and I think that's been for me, the most life-changing thing about the whole experience is merely that interaction with other people, which wasn't part of my life before. Yeah.
Well, no, I think, your books are...
Microphone.
Sorry. No, but it just shows, your books really are inspirational, and I think, they've changed your life and Moth's life, but I'm sure, everyone that's read them as well, just really inspirational. One more question, Ben?
One more. I've got another lovely one from Geraldine, and there's another hand up. Margaret's put a hand up over there, so can't miss Margaret out. Let's just do Geraldine first, Margaret, if that's all right. Have you always loved writing? So that point where you sat down and wrote Salt Path for Moth as a memory artist, had you been writing a long time before then?
No, no. When I was a child, I was always scribbling little stories and little notes, and I really thought I was going to grow up to be a writer and have a penguin on the spine of my book. But it just didn't happen. I became a teenager. Life took me down a different route. It just didn't happen in my life. And I didn't write at all. I didn't write anything until I wrote the very first bit that I wrote. We were under the stairs when I decided to walk, or whatever that opening line is. That was the first bit I wrote. And I thought, I like that. I'll write another sentence. And it went from there. So that was it.
Brilliant. And Margaret?
How is Moth now? How is he doing?
He was in incredible, in fact, remarkable health when we reached the end of those 1,000 miles. And he's still really well. But we've come to understand that these walks and the effects of the walk, they're not permanent. It's not like a one walk fixes this. We've come to understand really that the effects of that walk last for a while, and then his health starts to decline again. And he keeps himself incredibly active. He walks as much as his days allow. But we are getting towards the point where I think we just need to pick up those rucksacks again, and it needs to be more than a couple of days. Yeah. Thank you.
And well, it sounds like you have got a plan, so we'll be very keen to find out. Well, thank you ever so much, Raynor, for coming all the way to Tring. It's been really brilliant to have you here in person. We did speak online quite a long time ago now, didn't we? But really brilliant to welcome you properly to Tring. And again, just amazing for us all to be able to meet you and see the face behind these amazing walks, these amazing stories. And brilliant to hear that you're coming back with Salt Lines on the 22nd of July.
Indeed.
You know, even more people, I think. That'll be at the theatre?
Court Theatre. So,
So-
it's an event of two halves, 45 minutes each way.
Yeah. So we really look forward to that. I know lots of you have bought books, so Raynor's going to be signing books at the end. Is that going to be in here or outside?
So out in the foyer.
Out in the foyer.
The shop is still set up. So if you haven't got any books yet, just pop and see Kim and Miranda out there. So indeed online, I have been messaging you, and a few orders have come in through that. If you want any book signing, you can pick them up from the shop.
Yeah.
I will say one other thing. We've got some more events coming. Obviously, the festival in November is the main thing, but we've also got events coming all the time of different shapes and sizes. Next month, we've got Ben Aranovich from the Rivers of London series, and Bez, a very different event from the Happy Mondays. So.
Please do stay around and get books and come and get signatures. But can we just give Raynor a big round of applause?